We're going to get started in just a few minutes. We have a few more people who are coming on. So if you'll just a couple of housekeeping things as we get started. You should have been muted as you came onto the webinar. We ask that you please stay muted throughout the presentation. If you have a question throughout the webinar, please look down at the bottom of your screen and you'll find a chat box. If you click on that, you can ask the question within the chat box. We will hold the questions until the end of the presentations, and then we'll go through the questions first that are put in the chat box, and if there is still time, then we will unmute some of you or unmute you and you can ask questions from the audience. So we're going to give it 1 more minute because we had several other people signed up. We'll give them a chance to sign on and then we'll get started. Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Chamber's webinar, A Practical Guidance for Returning to the Office, presented by 3 members, Bridge Performance Consulting, Digital Industry, and Washington Workplace. We're going to hear some very practical considerations for when we get to go back to the offices. Some of you are already back in your offices. You may or may not have employees with you. You may be coming in part-time, but as we look to returning on a more new normal full scale, we're all going to need some advice on what to do and how to deal with our staff, how to deal with office layouts, and how to deal with a lot of our technology issues that some of us have learned how to deal with remotely. So with us today are Sonja Durr from Bridge Performance Coaching, Charles Atwell from Washington Workplace, and Mark Meszaros from Digital Industry. So this afternoon we're going to start with Sonja, and she's going to talk to us about some leadership and some staff considerations as we look at coming back to the office. So Sonja?
Well, thank you so much, Jane. I'm glad that everybody could join us today. We're glad you're here with us. My name is Sonja Durr, and my company is called Bridge Performance Coaching, and what we do is coach recruiting. So it's a unique blend of strategic coaching paired with targeted recruiting to make sure we find the best person to put in to give you the best performance and the overall best result for your small business. So without further ado, my portion of today's talk is going to focus in on leadership and staffing considerations with regard to return to office. So first we're going to take a look at organizational and staff structure. And we're going to start at the beginning. We're going to look at reviewing your vision and your mission. As we all are fully aware, and probably more so than we want to be, things have changed for all of us through COVID, some more than others. But this could mean that your vision needs to be adjusted and possibly even your mission. So it's really worth taking a look at that prior to putting your return to office plan into place and communicating that to your staff. And then the next thing would be recommitting to your core values. Core values is something I feel very strongly about. I hope you all have those established core values. If you don't, please talk to me afterward and I can give you some recommendations on that. But core values should not have changed. They are the pieces of your organization that really define who you are and who you're not. And in fact, they will help you determine what vision and mission adjustments you will or will not make. And now is the time to really recast your vision, your mission, and then remind your team why you're doing what you're doing in the first place, which should be spelled out in your core values. And then it's taking a look at the key business pivots. I think that's one of the words we've heard a lot right through the COVID-19 crisis is We've all had to pivot and shift. So now is the time to realize what are the pivots and the shifts that are really key to your business moving forward, that are going to be incorporated in your business plan. And then go ahead and make those adjustments before you communicate them to your staff. And then, of course, adjusting your goals to represent those key pivots. And then lastly, on this slide, making sure that you're seeking input from advisors and peers. We all are navigating uncharted waters. So get some feedback and have that all in place before talking to your staff. Okay, and then the next piece of things, and this is a very important piece that I don't want you to overlook. Very crucial that you assess the psychological wellness of your staff members. Realize that COVID-19 has affected everybody differently. The first person you want to look at with regard to how COVID has affected us is yourself as the leader of the organization. It's important that you acknowledge losses that you've experienced, both personal losses and business losses. Because if you don't take time to acknowledge those, they're going to come out somewhere, and probably in places that you would rather they don't come out. And then from there, you want to take a look at assessing your staff morale. Very important for you to realize that your team that you had a couple of months ago is not the same team. People have all been affected differently. This has had significant emotional and mental impact on different people. So really taking a look at how everybody is doing. John Hill, who is the chairman and CEO of the Energists executive search firm, said it well. He said, stress, fear, and anxiety are all the enemies of productivity. So when you bring your staff back to the office, you need to know that people you're bringing back are going to be productive for you. So your objective then is to express and provide utmost attention to employee safety measures. And then a close second to that, of course, is going to be safety measures for your clients. And then from there, you want to reset your team culture. So you're recasting your vision and your mission, and you're reminding them of why you're doing what you're doing, your core values. From there, very important that you provide some sort of a venue for your staff. So you're kind of laying out your proposed return to office plan, and then you're opening it up to them to allow them to provide you with feedback. That's going to give you a lot of information about where they are psychologically and emotionally as you're hearing their concerns. And it can help you in making the decisions of who you're bringing back right away and who you may want to keep remote for right now. And then lastly, on this slide, GWC your staff. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the book Traction. It's by Phil Wickman. I'd highly recommend it, based upon the Entrepreneurial Operating System, the EOS system. And in that book, it talks about GWCing your staff, always an important thing. So the G stands for do they get it? W, do they want it? And C, can they do it? In this case scenario, what you're looking at is, do they still get it? So remember, you've made adjustments, you've made shifts, you've pivoted. Do they still want it? They're in different places, psychologically, emotionally, all sorts of different ways. Do they still want the position that is being offered? Because that may look different than it did before. And can they still do it? They may have physical or other concerns that are causing them to not be able to perform the duty that you're asking of them. All those are important things to consider as you're putting your return to office plan into place. Okay, so now you're ready to establish your plan. And I would highly recommend putting a crisis management task force in place. Depending on the size of your business, this could be one person, it could be a few people. The important part of it is that they're people that you can really rely upon and trust. You know that they're in a good headspace, and they are going to be your eyes and ears within your team to kind of give you feedback on what's working, what's not, who's doing well, who's not. And then you want to designate them as the people who implement, document, and evaluate the needed precautions. And then you're going to want to obviously schedule regular check-ins with these people and make adjustments as needed. From there, you want to update your policies for both in-office and people who may be remaining remote for a while. You may even want to add a special section to your employee handbook specific to COVID-19 procedures and how you want to document them. And this will most likely be a work in progress. As we said before, we're navigating uncharted waters, so things are going to continue to change, and that's why this task force will be key for you. So an example of maybe a change that might be made or something that you're looking at adding for your COVID-19 policy is, what is your contingency plan for sick employees? How are you defining sick? And how are you going to address it? What are the things that your staff can expect so that they know you're keeping them safe? And then finally, important to point out, you need to know from a legal standpoint what you can and cannot ask of your employees. A lot of HR sources out there for you to reference. Society for Human Resource Management is a great source. Take a look at what you as employers can say and not say to your employees so that you're protecting yourself. Documentation and training guidelines. A great thing to think about on the first day back to the office is sitting down with your staff and talking about what the new expectations are, what documentation expectations you have of them. So everybody is clear on what is expected. And finally, just protocols for employee and client health protection are going to be key. Make sure that they're made clear, that they're documented, and that they're prominently displayed. Signage is going to be really important, and I know Charlie's going to talk about that in his section. Okay, now we're going to talk about leadership specifically. So as the leader, we have already navigated a lot. And there are still so many unknowns, and we have a long road ahead of us. So I hope all of you have kind of heard the term grit before and how important that is. It's those soft skills that we're looking at in ourselves and our key employees. And grit really is maintaining a mindset of growth, resilience, instinct, and tenacity. So what does that look like? It looks like remembering what you want and why, and demonstrating determination and passion as you take every step in the process to get there. It's again acknowledging the losses you've experienced and realizing that there are going to be failures along the way. Because of the fact that this is an unprecedented situation, we don't know what we don't know, and we have to give ourselves some leeway to make mistakes as we figure it out. Ignore the critics and learn to trust your gut again. I know many of us as leaders have had our confidence really shaken through this time, but it's crucial that we regain faith in our leadership instincts, and especially important because our staff is looking to us. We are setting the tone. And then dig in, do the work, and fuel your efforts, and remember how you got to where you are in the first place. And then important for all facets of things to establish accountability. Have people that you rely upon as your accountability people, and make sure you have accountability measures in place for your staff, and especially those that are still working remotely. Making sure that you're clarifying expectations, and these will change sometimes on a daily basis as you navigate what's working and what's not, but just make sure that your staff knows what you expect of them. Looking at collaborative solutions. Flexibility and creativity are going to be your best friends as you figure this out. And then intentional 360 communication. Communication is absolutely crucial. If you are not communicating, especially in a time of crisis, people are going to make things up. Your staff are going to fill in the gaps of what you're not saying to them, and that's just not a great idea. It can create speculation and mistrust. And right now, more than anything, you absolutely need their buy-in and you need their trust. So over-communicate. Schedule regular check-in sessions where you provide updates and allow them to voice their concerns as well. Okay, and then finally, and I would say most important during this time, something I feel very passionate about is staff appreciation. I feel like that's always important, but especially now. Acknowledge the sacrifices that they're making. Remember, they're going through a lot of really difficult times too. Many of them have kids at home that they're trying to figure out those logistics. Acknowledge extra efforts and shifts that they're having to make. Provide ongoing social and emotional outlets for them. Have a happy hour. Provide lunch for them every couple of weeks. Important that you remain accessible. They need to know that you have their back, both personally and professionally, especially during this time. And finally, express your gratitude. Say thank you. A thank you is worth 1,000 words. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Charlie Atwell. He's VP of Sales for Washington Workplace. And he's going to share some thoughts and ideas on office designs and furniture products that are helping to make the transition. Charlie?
Thanks, Sonja. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be with you, especially with the Greater Silver Spring Chamber of Commerce as a past chairperson and board member and resident and business person in Silver Spring. I'm just really happy to be with you guys today. So at Washington Workplace, Art and Sonja talked about mission statements, and so this is part of our mission statement. And so returning to office and helping folks do that process is important to what we do in creating good interior spaces for folks to work in. So as we return to office, we're getting all kinds of information daily on how to return to office. Pick a publication. We're seeing them on websites. And I'm going to walk through a few suggestions, product options, and resources for you. And we're here as a resource. So certainly after the webinar, if you've got questions or concerns, or I can be a resource to you, please reach out to me and I'd be happy to talk to you. So here's an overview of lots of different things that are coming out. And as I said, they're coming out on a daily basis. And so the landscape is really evolving. So as we take a look at the various options, here's some thought starters. So benching has been something that's very popular with work surfaces next to one another. If you look at the top left, that shows one right next to another, bottom right. So we've rotated those, given more separation. The CDC recommends that we have that 6-foot social distancing. And so that's important that you think about that, whether you're in an open plan situation, and the different ways to achieve this. In the next slide, there we go. So hands-free sanitizer at the entrance. Perhaps your reception station may now have a plexiglass enclosure, and we'll take a look at that in a few minutes. Temperature scans, signage, stickers on the floor for directional movement is going to be important as well. Okay. So here's the next few slides show you some examples of either plexiglass, and there are a couple different schools of thought on plexiglass versus glass versus upholstery. Go ahead. So over the next couple of slides, this is a freestanding acrylic screen. Again, another one that has a cutout at the bottom, so you can actually transact if you're a customer service person in a retail situation or a bank maybe. This might be an opportunity for you. Okay. Full enclosures, keeping it open, keeping it accessible, counter shields in the lower right. And they come in lots of different sizes to accommodate different desk situations. So this is one of our manufacturer partners. And you can see that in the upper left, there is an opening in that glass. In this case, Claris makes glass boards. So they make clear, this is a mobile configuration where the person on the right is taking the temperature of the person on the left, and they're able to stick that through, but have a barrier in between. And in their particular case, they're recommending glass because it's cleanable with any type of solution that's going to kill any type of bacteria. Okay. Signage within the workplace, either on the floor or around, helping people. And I'm sure you've seen them in the grocery stores, the one-way lanes. And if you're in a larger office, that's something you might want to consider. On that particular slide is also some CDC print resources where you can actually print off these signs, and this will be part of the presentation that's made available to you after the webinar in PDF form. Okay. Again, more signage opportunities. Okay. Here's a desk-based solution. Again, it's about allowing opportunities for there to be both the perception, but really the true separation, so that we have that in between. Go ahead. And sit stand is a very popular concept these days. So the height adjustable tables, and here's some solutions that are designed for that purpose, and it shows the monitors, etc. Go ahead. Lots of workstations out there, and there are lots of different ways over the next few slides that you can get some height if you've got lower work surfaces. So they can be upholstered, they can be plexiglass, they can be glass, they can be divided in lots of different ways. Here's benching again. So these are stable. They fit over both the desk and you see there's a base on the floor. And there are lots of different manufacturers out there with lots of different solutions for you to consider, okay? These are upholstered, so they also offer some acoustical opportunities. They're bleach cleanable, so that's another. It's all about cleaning the surfaces and coming up with a protocol within your office to clean surfaces, especially if you're in a situation where you have multiple office users in the same space, okay? And some additional options there. So as you can see, there are lots of different ways to divide the space. Here's some sample configurations of dividing space. You might have had an open area. You might be in a situation where you're a contractor and you're getting contracts with the federal government. The next slide illustrates where, I think it's the next one, there you go, that's a system that comes just like it is in the upper right and makes those 4 stations. And so it's easily reconfigured, okay? There are things that you can add to workstations or offices, and and they're quick. So anybody who you're working with, certainly we'd love to work with you, but if you have somebody who you work with, it's going to be giving them direction on the kind of environment you currently have and what you need it to be for your employees to feel comfortable and to be safe, okay? Mobile screens can come into play. Easily divided space, okay? Whiteboards, whether they're glass or porcelain, can help divide space as well. Provides a writable surface. In a corporate cafeteria, restaurant, those cactus are really divisions, and they provide that division, and they're cleanable as well, okay? Vinyls are going to play an important part in seating. We have a lot of clients right now who are either reupholstering or replacing their chair seats that were previously upholstered with vinyl seats. And vinyl has come a long, long way so that you can get attractive vinyls, again, that are cleanable, bleach cleanable, and are going to be a lot safer in the long run versus an upholstered seat, okay? Of course, hand sanitizer throughout the office, at the entrance, and then throughout the spaces. Developing new protocols. Your kitchen or your water dispenser, your coffee dispenser, it's going to be developing protocols that are going to work for those areas to be used in different ways now than they were previously, okay? This slide will be important to you. It has a lot of interesting articles, documents, and we are getting these. I just got a great resource from, I believe it's the San Francisco area Chamber of Commerce that had just a ton of resources and solutions. Just got that this morning as a matter of fact. So there are lots of resources out there for you to take advantage of. And again, I'll be happy to answer any questions a little bit later. So our next presenter is Mark Meszaros, who is the CEO and President of Digital Industry, and he's going to talk about the technology implications. Take it away, Mark.
Thank you, Charlie. I appreciate it. Thank you also to the Greater Silver Spring Chamber of Commerce, Jane and its staff, and just so that I follow everybody's advice, thank you. I appreciate that you guys are working hard to keep us all in communication with one another, putting together thought leadership and also helping to guide us. It's particularly important to me also as a chamber member to know that I'm doing the things to protect my staff. And as I present this to you, I would like you to know that I'm doing it through the lens of being a business owner. I have, at the end of the day, all the same IT needs that any other business does. So who are we? Digital Industry is a full service IT support company. We do projects, but the majority of our clients, we are their full-time IT department. And we do that across all different service areas that you would expect from your IT department. So for me, I come at this from a perspective of the risks. I want to know them. I want to know how I can potentially avoid them. The question that I've seen is, why can't we just re-engage and go with the attitude that some will get sick? And the questions that I ask myself then are, well, what are the liabilities as a business? What if I reopen and didn't follow practices? Can I have a staff member come back and hold the business accountable for an illness that somehow has impacted them or even extended onward into their family? What are my moral responsibilities? As a business owner, what do I need to take into consideration? If I have staff who have elderly family members living with them, do I have to make some sort of adjustment in the requirements as to what their return to work will be versus somebody who is not in that scenario? And also, what about the impact to staff? What if an illness returns and it returns in my office space? What am I going to possibly do? Then what's the attitude of the staff going to be? Are they going to feel unsafe of the digital industry as an organization hasn't taken care of them? Again, and personally, how is that going to impact myself as an owner and as a leader? Obviously, we have to consider that we're in business to make money. We're in business to be successful ventures in the areas of specialization that we provide. Digital industry, in this case, is IT. But I can't be successful without my staff. Okay, so I then took a specific look at a few cases and said, okay, I'm looking from an IT lens, right? But how do I deal with the fact that these types of instances have been happening? So the CDC website has this particular reference case, and this was an outbreak in a call center. It's a densely packed work environment, and one individual in the period of 10 days infected 43% of their coworkers. That type of a contagion, how am I even going to bring folks back into the office is a question that I've asked myself, and I've talked about with other business owners in my CEO groups that I participate in. And these are the questions we're asking ourselves. And it's not just about taking care of the staff. That's, of course, critical and key. But the other part of this is I can't function as a business if 43% of my staff are ill, right? So if I'm looking at other situations, and this was an outbreak that happened over a 53-minute period, again, from the CDC website, this case was that patient A1 was the non-symptomatic infected individual and overlapped with the tables with their own party at the table and then the tables around themselves. And those became infected, they feel, as a first level case from A1. And that happened over a 53-minute period. And at the end of the day, they said this was likely airborne. And it was why they emphasized the way the air conditioning was blowing through where the exhaust fan was, and that C1 and C2 were likely infected because a bit of a looping effect, what they called turbulent air, where it returned up the sides of the room and then blew backwards again along the path of the air conditioning. Now, in 53 minutes, one non-symptomatic individual who showed symptoms later that same day had infected this many people. Again, from a business and IT perspective, how do I deal with this? So how can IT help? And my thought is that we need to embrace the fact that we've had a paradigm shift. Right? We need to look at the reality that historically the physical office has dictated how our IT was designed. And what I mean by this is when a client came to me in the last 20 years, if we went back some years, we had servers in their office. We had desktop computers. The staff was expected to physically show up to that location to execute the work. They may not have even had the ability to do any type of a remote or telecommuting. And we're very lucky as a society, as a global society, and certainly for many of us in the businesses that we're in, that we're able to even shift into a telecommuting type of environment. That being said, many companies' line of business applications are often still set up only to work within the office or with a limited function from a remote perspective. And that is also understood and makes complete sense. And I'll give you the extreme example of that. One of the CEOs that I get together with regularly his organization specializes in working for the NSA. They're not allowed to telecommute. And so he has the greater amount of his staff who've just simply gone home. There's no way for them to telecommute, and there's no way for them to currently go into the office, as the NSA was also concerned about all the same things that we're concerned about. So in that case, remote doesn't even work. And there certainly are businesses that have those realities where a change or a pivot isn't going to work. But since March, we've experienced a shotgun wedding of being forced into teleworking as a primary work environment. And that means that we have now spent 60 days, 2 months becoming good at being teleworkers. And I know that it started rough because as an IT company, we were inundated over that first week, 2 weeks, even through the first month, just getting folks up and off the ground with the basics, as they hadn't prepared and they didn't have tool sets in place, or their staff wasn't trained and oriented for it, right? So the businesses that could pivot did so to keep their work flowing, their staff successful. And of course, as we all know, the types of tools we're using right now, collaborative tools shot up massively, Teams, Slack, Zoom, all right? But in many cases, you have to ask yourself now, whose tools are these anyway? They're at home. If a staff person's at home using equipment that belongs to them, their internet connection, and those are being used as a stopgap measure to use some sort of a program to access into the office, a go to my PC or any other variation thereof, then whose tools are actually being used to conduct business? Do they belong to the employee or do they belong to the company? And obviously, if they own them, they belong to the company. So now you have to say, well, what's happened to the chain of custody of the company data? Before this happened, would you have allowed a staff person to bring in their home PC, hook it up to your computer network, and then take it back home with them, where it's also being worked on by their children and other family members? I mean, that would have been unheard of, I would expect, for most businesses. But here we're doing it now, and it was just an accepted step that needed to be done. Now, some businesses, the Chamber as an example, decided to go significantly to using only laptops. And we supported them in that. And I think in this case, that worked out to be a brilliant decision because they were able to now take those devices, take them home. And the next issue here is not going to be as much of a problem for the Chamber. And that is now that all of those all the documents that have become local that were corporate documents are on these home PCs, how are you going to recover them and ensure that the knowledge and the information that belongs to the corporation is coming back off of these personal bring your own device situations? And will you in fact embrace using them in some manner, or will they be eliminated? And of course, administratively, you can have all the IT you would like in the world, but if you don't have your policy documents and your information laying out what is acceptable and unacceptable use of those devices, whether it be a home device or a device that belongs to the organization, well, then there's no guidelines, and what you think is acceptable or unacceptable may be very different in the minds of your staff member. So as doing a lot of home projects, including remodeling, measure twice, cut once has been in my mind a lot. And I put it here in this slide because I feel the same way about the decisions that we're currently making. All right, and we should ask ourselves a number of different questions and assess the way that we pivoted to get work done. Is this really a good long-term plan? Did you pivot by good fortune into the perfect remote IT workspace? Or in fact, do you need to take a deep breath, go back and say, okay, we got ourselves through. Now let's talk about what's ideal. And I encourage this because we need to face the reality that there's a good chance many staff do not want to come back into the office. And we've been hearing it. I'm sure everybody has, that, you know, large corporations are talking about never going back into the office again the way that they once did. So this has left a permanent change in our IT environment. Now let's talk about if the changes we made were in fact thoughtful and well done. So did we use the best tools? Will the organization continue to support and pay for those remote tools and licenses going forward? Did they pay for the use of the home internet? Did they pay for the use of the home PC? Do they need to going into the future? These things now need to have some level of thoughtful consideration. And again, I think that's very key in my own mind. I say, if you're gonna put a policy out on how a home computer is to be used, you're really overstretching yourself if you don't also say, we're going to give some sort of an allowance or per diem to support the use of that home computer as a corporate resource. All right, and if you choose to say, bring your own devices to end, well, how will organizations manage the retention of the data before those devices are sanitized? Obviously, you have to go through an entire process to think, how will they even be sanitized? How will you execute it? They're not your device, right? So you have to think that through. And the next step then is what changes should happen. So if you are going to say, well, we're not giving laptops to everybody, well, then virtual PCs, brilliant solution. I would recommend that as a choice for many, many people who used were highly reliant on desktop machines that may be going the path of a VIP, a virtual in the cloud PC, a virtual office that belongs to you might be the way to go. That way the remote computer is nothing more than a keyboard, mouse, and monitor. You control where all your data is located. And that would work equally well to have your office computer then connect to those same VIPs when the staff chooses to work from the office. So we have choices. We have different ways that this can be done. So let's talk about long-term planning. And the devil really is in the details here, all right? But you're living it. And there's no better example in the world than to sit there and say, I get up in the morning, I do X, I do Y, I do Z. Let's talk about what's working and what's not working. We don't, I always encourage folks to look at IT from the perspective of function. How does it work for you? Is it achieving the goals? Is it doing what you need it to do? Don't worry about the technology and the buzzwords and cloud or not cloud or any of these items. Strictly focus on, is the tool enabling you to be successful in the area that you're working in? All right. And if not, what needs to change? All right. Next is that if we have another lockdown, which is entirely plausible, if we have spikes that we could be locked down again, or if something entirely different happened. Over 20 years, I can tell you that we've had buildings that have burned and clients had to move out. We've had floods. We've had other disasters. These things are real world events. And let's say, I mean, let's not forget, I mean, those of us who went through 9/11, the whole downtown district was locked off in DC for a number of weeks. We couldn't even get to offices and client locations. We need to map out contingency and emergency plans, not tomorrow. I think it's clear to us, it's a now moment. All right, so since you're in the now and you're living it, let's mature it, okay? So how well is your existing technology and telecommuting policies working? How well are they instructing your staff to achieve the goal? I have documents. We have them available for download off of our website. We have lots of resources available to you, the Silver Spring partners in business, that you can use as soup starter as you begin to map these items out. But let me just use myself again as an example. Approximately 5 years ago, digital industry began doing 2 days of complete remote work. We used 2 days that also happened to be holidays. And we put together standard operating procedure, how to be a proper telecommuter where we can't go to the office. We have a lot of staff who know how to do this. We implement these systems, but it was amazing to me nonetheless that I found after the first year of doing it, that I had staff members who didn't know how to access certain, what I considered basic line of business software tool sets. And when their answer was, at the time, was that it wasn't critical to them because they knew they could get to it the next day, right? But that missed the point. And I needed to go back and live my SOP and think through, how do I communicate to my staff my expectations? I don't want them to be encumbered when they're remote. I need them to be just as effective and efficient as they are in the office. So find out what hasn't been working and find ways to address it. So I encourage you to invest for your success. We're in this, we've spent the money, whether you got a grant from the county or anybody else to spend on your IT infrastructure, you've spent money. Now assess, and as a recap, I need to say again, assess how your business is functioning today. Make your plans now. Go ahead now and set budgets and timelines. So you'll be in the office again in 2020 or not. You're going to go hybrid office through 2020, and you might consider a greater reimplementation of Office in 2021. Figure that path out. We're not in a place where one should sit around and say, can't make a decision. I don't know a path. It's all unknown. It's all unknown. No, rather, we take away stress in our lives by removing uncertainties. And even if we can't have all the answers, we can map paths to remove our uncertainties by putting a plan of action in place. Mature your business by executing the changes to your infrastructure, policies, and processes. So Jane, that is everything that I have to present, and we are into the QA phase. So I believe you and your staff had a way that you wanted to run this part of the event. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Jane and Julie.
Well, thank you very much, Sonja and Charlie and Mark. We have one question so far in the chat, and that's, does anyone know about air filters for an enclosed space?
So
Enclosed office space specifically.
Sure. So I think that there's some exploration of air filters, especially in conference rooms, and there are some sources out there. I think if I'm happy to follow up on the source that I had. If the person who had that question contacts me, I'd be happy to link them up. It's not something we do. I did read an article this morning, as a matter of fact, that one of the challenges that we have in our big office buildings are that a lot of the HVAC systems are not designed to bring fresh air in. And so that's something that the HVAC folks are looking at big time now. But if you get in touch with me, I'll be happy to hook you up with that source.
Yeah, that's a very interesting item, Charlie. I had that already because digital industry, we have a second business. We also own the portion of the building that we're in, and we are a tenant to ourselves, but we also have additional tenants. And one of our tenants has already come to us and asked about that as well. And I have to say that's a really good question, because the systems are designed, the windows don't open, and the systems are designed to circulate the existing air with only a small amount of percentage of additional outside air to be introduced. So I've wondered about the same. I do know that there are systems out there in the residential space that have UV lighting and have a different level of filtering and otherwise going on. But so far, I'm still also very hungry to see what folks have to say in this particular space, and if there's answers coming out of the HVAC side.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. Do you expect there to be laws surrounding signage, airflow barriers, and materials? If not, or if so, do you also expect guidance from the feds or the state? And what about best practices? So I guess the question is, do you expect that we'll have very, very specific direction and laws that will govern this, or will it just be guidance and best practices as we're seeing now?
So we're talking from an interiors point, Jane, is that what you're?
They're saying signage, airflow, barriers, and materials.
So, yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind when you say barriers is is ADA. And so they're currently around barriers. I guess as we work to divide space a little bit differently, I think that the fire codes still need to be adhered to so that you have egress in case of an emergency. I think that there are guidelines that will come out in terms of how we provide signage, and some of the things that we're doing for our clients in terms of the partitions that you saw could indeed be temporary if a vaccine comes out and that kind of solves the problem. Yeah, these things could be taken off and discarded. So what businesses are weighing out is how big an investment do we make and how long will we have to keep it? And those are all unknowns at this point.
I think you're right. I was actually on another call this morning with the Secretary of Commerce from Maryland, and questions came up. They put together various work groups to come up with guidance and best practices for various business sectors that the governor had announced earlier, and they've already come up with guidance for the sectors that were open, for golf courses, for manufacturing, for marinas, and I think for some other operations. And the Commerce Department groups are working on that. But again, they're all guidance at this point in time. And the question was, what will be required? What will be the law? And then the bigger question is who enforces it as we go forward. And I think we're still in that area of unknown. And that's what the Secretary of Commerce told us this morning. It's right now they've been told to issue guidance to the governor, and that's where it stands.
Sure.
So I think a lot of people are following the CDC recommendations. The next question, does anyone know about ozone cleaning systems? You turn it on at night, it's supposed to sanitize the office spaces while people are out of the office. I guess that's for you, Charlie.
I don't. I've seen that there are, in fact, I think you guys did a webinar with one of the members around cleaning and disinfecting. We're
going to be doing that later the week.
Okay. Yeah, I knew that it was either coming up, but yeah, that might be a question for those folks. And I don't want to get the company wrong, so I don't want to say it, but if you want to say the company name,
ServPro
might have some information on that as well.
Okay. Does anyone else have a question? If so, just unmute yourself and ask your question at this point in time. Or hold up your hand. I can't see the hands because of the system.
Hey, Jane, while we're waiting for a question, it's Mark. I have one for you. A lot of the business owners that I have been talking to in the various different groups, CEO groups and such, we're talking about creating physical distance besides the barriers that Charlie has shown by staying in a significant telecommuter type of structure. So what we're calling hybrid office. Has that been a trend in the conversations for you, I assume, as well?
Yes, we're talking about all sorts of options, but as I think all of you have said, the idea of teleworking is a new normal, and it's something that a lot of people have found that they like. It works for a lot of folks, and so I think that it will be the answer to some childcare issues. It'll be the answer to some other issues going forward. So I think that a hybrid office situation is something that everybody has been talking about on the webinars that I've been on. And I think that's because I think the expectation is everybody wants the vaccine to come now as quickly as possible, but I think there's a realization that it's going to be a while. And so that we're going to be kind of in this state of unknown for a long time. So by controlling it and making it workable to have some folks go into the office if need be when we can, and then have folks work from home, that's been a lot of the conversation. The other piece of the conversation is around just how, and Mark, you showed some pictures of this, and Charlie, maybe you can talk about this, not just the physical distancing, but how do you figure out if they say we can go back at 25%, for example, how do business owners figure out, okay, what's 25%, and how do I get 6 feet between people, but how do I work through all of that? And for retail and restaurant operations, they'll have to figure it out. But for others, maybe they don't have to figure it out. Maybe it's the easiest thing is to just have a certain number of staff come in at one particular point in time. So yeah, there are a lot of conversations about, where we're going, and that not everybody will be working in the office going forward. It'll solve a lot of the commuting problems. It'll solve a lot of traffic issues that we have, but it also is going to create, I think, the other conversations that we've had is there are a lot of people who need this personal connection. And it's nice that we're here over Zoom. We've had a lot of these, a lot of us are zoomed out, but the need for a personal connection is really innate in us as human beings. And so how are we going to deal with that? Because for a lot of people, being in the office with your colleagues is an important part of your work life. So that's a whole other issue that people are trying to get their arms around right now.
Sure. Well, Sonja is absolutely right in what she was saying. And in listening to Sonja and others, I can say I've taken it to the next steps, asking my partners, and not just the staff, but the people around me. One of my staff suddenly has decided to shave his head. For me, that was an immediate warning sign. Is he's just getting stir crazy? Is this already on the roadmap, or do I need to worry about this individual? Yeah, I'm really paying a lot more attention to them in that regard.
I think, Jane, there are companies that are developing protocols for whether it's alternate, platooning scheduling is one of the terms that's being used, where you're alternating the staff that come in. But with that comes then also, as Mark alluded to, the shared, whether it's shared technology, it's developing protocols for cleaning surfaces from one group to the next group, how your kitchenette, how your coffee machine, how your water cooler, all those kinds of things, how people deal with those. And there are beginning to be some templates for protocols that are out there that people can, you don't have to start from scratch. You can take recommendations, but it's definitely going to be walking in uncharted territory very carefully.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the other conversations that I've been hearing, not just recently, are that some of these protocols, some of it is going to definitely be for our safety, for our staff safety, for our customer safety, but much of it is going to be to maybe even companies going overboard. I've talked to companies who they're going to take the recommendations from CDC, they're going to take the recommendations from the state and whatever, and they're going to take that a step further just because they want their employees and their customers to have confidence in coming back. So they're going to demonstrate very clearly that we're doing everything and more. Somebody compared it a little bit to the way the TSA and everything after 9/11. Some of the stuff that is being done is for our safety and security, but some of it is for show because it's important. And so I've heard people talking about the importance of that as well.
Yeah,
that's wise.
Go ahead, Sonja.
I was just going to say that's wise. It's people need that extra level of reassurance right now, both staff and clients.
Okay. Well, I don't see any more questions. We're coming right up to the hour. Does anybody want to make any closing comments? First of all, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Sonja Durr from Bridge Performance Coaching and Charlie Atwell from Washington Workplaces and Mark from Digital Industry for putting this together. I think this has been a very helpful and very useful seminar. And I think that the participants, we've kept everybody on for the full hour. So I think that tells us that everybody was really interested and you had some really good, some good content for us today. And I think Julie we've got this going recording. So this will be available afterwards. Do you guys have any closing remarks?
I would say that I think each of us are available to our fellow members as a resource. If you've got questions or concerns, if we don't have the answer, we'll find it for you. I think that Sonja and Mark both have opportunities for chamber members as well.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
No, please, Sonja.
Well, first of all, thank you so much to the Greater Silver Spring Chamber for hosting this today. We really appreciate that. And what I'd like to offer from Bridge Performance Coaching is I'm doing a 25% discount on any coaching services for teams related to return to office navigating those uncharted waters, having those conversations with your staff, trying to strategically think through who you're bringing back, how you're doing all of that. So if you're interested in the months of May and June, please contact me. I'd be happy to help.
Yeah, and from the DI side, we're going to continue, as we have been, our leadership learning. We consider this part of the leadership learning. We're working hard at identifying the various different tools that are out there that are really functioning well. I saw Michael Pfeiffer, who's looks like he's off now. Oh, no, he's not. He's there with Atlantech. They've got some great new products coming out. Merging cell phones into your work phone system, as well as Teams for those who are using that as well. So there's a lot of great tools coming out, things that we're doing on the IT space to really mature along and create collaborative environments when we all have everybody as a distance, in a physically distant as we are. So my offer is please keep an eye out. We will be available to talk to anybody if they have interests in any of these areas, but we'll also available just to present on that leadership learning side so that folks can be aware of what we're doing.
And I thank you, everyone. That's what it's all about, to be member to member, help each other out through this. And likewise, the Chamber has tried to be a resource to everyone. So if anybody has any questions or would like any guidance, we can help refer you back to these guys, or you can get in touch with them directly. Or if there's anything on other subjects, please reach out to the Chamber. We do have another webinar. Julie helped me with the dates and times on cleaning your offices before you get back there, and that's with ServPro, and Julie helped me with the time.
So that is going to be Thursday at 9 a.m. Thursday,
Okay,
May 21st at 9 a.m.
Okay, and the next one that's coming up is we're also going to be, we have 3 members who produce signs primarily, and they're going to be getting together to do a webinar on the considerations that a business should have in terms of producing both signs for the outside and signs for the inside. So that's coming up in the next couple of weeks. We'll look for more on that. And also look for more on, there's a new, can be some new government aid programs. There have been some changes to forgiveness on the PPP if any of you applied. We are waiting for SBA to get permission to do something on the PPP forgiveness application. For some reason, they've been told to hold on that, so we shall see. So stay tuned for more, and thank you again to all of our presenters. Thank you very much for hosting this with us. And then thank you all to our attendees, and have a great rest of your day and stay safe.
Take care.
Thank you.